If you want to learn how to deal with anxiety and overcome the physical and mental tension that might be disrupting your life, stay tuned until the end because this video is for you. I'll explain the source of your anxiety and show you simple, effective ways to regulate your stress. First, we must understand some of the processes our mind carries out, which are decisive in contexts of anxiety. This is how our mind works. The mind goes through nothing less than about 100,000 thoughts daily, and most of them are negative, repetitive, and about the past. In this way, we live immersed in what psychologists call the monkey mind, a tendency to ruminate or get lost in a constant stream of thoughts. And what happens? It's not easy to reach a state of severe anxiety. It requires prolonged exposure to repeated negative thoughts about everything you don't want to happen in your environment, until eventually, your nervous system goes into panic. Secondly, we need to understand the concept of autopilot mode. In addition to the above, we act on autopilot, disconnected from the present moment. The autopilot mode refers to a state in which an individual acts without being fully present, often lost in their thoughts. And also, thirdly, we will briefly talk about cognitive biases. Our personality and identity are a result of inheritance. We are the product of a collective unconscious, a cultural, historical, and ethnic inheritance, experiences, acquired teachings, family status, and much more, which results in each individual being a unique and unrepeatable blend. The glasses through which a Westerner views the world, for example, are very different from those of an Easterner. We say that the mind works like a kind of program, similar to how software functions. Thus, we actually act as an automatic program that runs based on information previously introduced and assimilated, without reflection, questioning, or any reasoning in many aspects. And what does this often lead us to? This biased perception, this thoughtless and irrational behavior, usually drives us to act impulsively. A large part of our decisions and behaviors are influenced or determined by these biases, which are nothing more than unconscious programming, for example, prejudices, internalized social norms that trigger automatic emotional responses. We live thoughtlessly, immersed in a society of hyperdemand and meritocracy, in an unnatural way, which inevitably leads to significant cases of severe stress. Additionally, we need to understand that we are not what we think. In this context, the concepts of the ego and the true self are also relevant, as presented in the video, which I'll leave the link to in the description, that is part of the series dedicated to the wisdom of the Enneagram on this channel. And what is one of the major ailments of the West? Stress, which are responsible for more than 80% of serious diseases, such as cancer. When you are going through a particularly tense, difficult, and painful moment in your life, the tension worsens, and your internal defense mechanisms are triggered. The anguish and tension are not so much a result of the event itself that causes them, but rather the interpretation you give to that event. You might think that your anxiety is the result of the situations you're currently experiencing, tension on a personal, work, or social level. However, while our minds often dwell on the past or the future, only the present truly exists. So, we typically suffer from anxiety and fear about the future, and regret and sorrow about the past. Anxiety and distress do not arise from what you're experiencing in the present moment, but from the future you fear will happen. And in most cases, the causes of those fears never actually come to pass. We torment ourselves over things that, in reality, almost never happen. And how does our system get into panic? Let's talk about the survival instinct. Prolonged exposure to repeated thoughts causes your brain to activate a protective nervous response, convinced that your thoughts are signaling the arrival of an imminent great danger. Why does this happen? Since ancient times, humans have developed a psychological mechanism to anticipate catastrophes and fatal outcomes in order to survive. Humans have survived thanks to this strong mental tendency to anticipate catastrophic futures and fatal outcomes. This was necessary in environments where humans faced real dangers, like being chased by a lion or attacked by a snake. However, in today's world, thankfully, we are not competing for physical survival. We are competing for economic, social, and professional survival. This is much easier to deal with if we act in a reflective and rational way. Then the key is to train your brain to stop labeling those negative thoughts as threats. Something that torments you, with your mind constantly imagining a future you've labeled as intolerable, such as being fired from your job, your partner leaving you, having no money, or becoming physically or mentally ill. Don't resist the thoughts that generate anxiety. The most effective strategy is to change how your brain interacts with those negative thoughts. This way, it stops believing they are imminent threats, giving you space for reflection and appropriate management. You need to tell your system that it's not necessary to activate a severe alert system in response to stimuli that aren't actually dangerous. We no longer live in those environments where lions and snakes lurked around us. The current snakes and lions you fear confronting are all those things you don't want to happen in your work environment, in your relationships, in your finances, or in your health. What can you do so that your mind stops generating all the anxiety that is destroying you? The key is maintaining a healthy internal cognitive dialogue as the foundation of emotional strength. Being present, managing the mind, clearing out negative thoughts like weeds. Even more so, questioning limiting beliefs that keep you trapped in irrational fears and anxieties. You need to make your brain stop labeling those negative thoughts as threats. Many people with anxiety try to resist those thoughts that generate anxiety. They make a great effort to block them. But this strategy, far from helping, only makes things worse. The more you try to resist the thoughts that disturb you, the stronger they appear. Why does this happen? Because when you fight against those alarming thoughts, your brain believes you're ignoring the threats, which could have terrible consequences, so it amplifies those thoughts to make sure you activate your defenses. And voila, empirically proven. The strategy that works for thousands of people is to change the way your brain interacts with those negative thoughts, so it stops believing they are real threats in a reflective and rational way. On one hand, if we reflect carefully, most of the things that torment us aren't really that terrible. We live in a society of terribilitis, a culture full of unfounded fears, where we're terrified by things like the thought of a partner leaving us, fueled by the irrational belief that only a person can make us happy. On top of that, it's empirically proven, almost none of our fears actually come to pass over time. We spend most of our lives haunted and terrified by fears that have no basis in reality. Now let's go through a series of steps to overcome an anxiety episode. Of course, if it's a serious episode, don't hesitate to see a trusted psychotherapist right away. Start by defining exactly what it is that scares you. Pinpoint the cause that's triggering those anxious thoughts. Until you define it, it remains something dark, unknown, lurking in the background, and that makes it even more terrifying. What are you afraid of? Social situations, work, romantic situations. And from there, keep clarifying it more and more, until you have something very specific. The more specific it is, the less terrifying it becomes. Then rationalize with inner dialogue. And the next step is to voluntarily expose yourself to that fear. This is key in psychotherapy. If you're afraid of something, you need to expose yourself to that fear progressively. Facing fear intentionally, in a controlled environment where we can decide how far we want to go, causes the nervous system to respond positively. Instead of labeling that fear as a danger to protect ourselves from or run away from, we label it as an obstacle to overcome. This triggers the challenge response, which activates enthusiasm and focus. Involuntary or accidental exposure can harm you, but voluntary and controlled exposure is curative. You go little by little, step by step, seeing how far you can go and what you can tolerate. And how do you expose yourself little by little? There are two ways, one mental and one physical, and you can work on both simultaneously. Let's start with the mental strategy. Mindfulness is precisely that, observing the behavior of your mind, without identifying with your thoughts, without judgment. Mindfulness is an English word that means full attention. Though it has gained popularity in recent years, its roots go back over 2,500 years to Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. This detachment allows us to observe our thoughts from the outside, transforming us into observers rather than being reactive beings driven by thoughtless impulses. What does mindfulness propose? It suggests training that muscle of attention and developing the ability to focus on the present moment. Instead of getting lost in automatic thoughts and endless ruminations, mindfulness encourages us to cultivate the skill of staying present, observing our thoughts without judgment, and choosing how we respond to them. This practice helps create a space between stimulus and reaction, allowing us to act with intention rather than impulsively. And what does it mean to be in the present moment? It means that our mind is not distracted by thoughts of the past or worries about the future. We are fully engaged in whatever is happening right now. For example, you might be showering, but instead of enjoying the warm water, your mind is stuck on yesterday's argument or worrying about an upcoming meeting. At home, try to stay focused, free from phone distractions or work matters. Being present means fully immersing in the moment, without past or future concerns taking over. Achieving moments of presence is not easy at all, since the mind constantly drifts in a chaos of thoughts. But with discipline, you can train the mind in different ways to achieve mindfulness, to be present in the here and now. You can achieve this state through meditation. This is not easy. You can meditate by focusing on your breath and feeling the relaxation, for example. You can also reach this state of mindfulness through physical exercise. When you're in the gym with a bar loaded with 120 kilograms, you're not thinking about office problems, you're focused on lifting that bar. Physical effort itself is a great way to stay in the present and fully focused. The same goes for writing, journaling, introspection, reading, and reflecting. There are 1,000 ways to reach a state of mindfulness. We each must find the method that works best for us. Meditation isn't for everyone, nor is it easy for everyone. Your mind will continue generating those negative thoughts, but the difference is that you will no longer respond with anxiety to them, because your alarm systems no longer activate, as they have been trained to handle them. The practice of mindfulness offers us a path to guide us back to our center and, in doing so, find peace. It is the sacred art of living consciously, of living in the present. Soon you will notice that there is more space for awareness between what happens in your external, everyday life and yourself, and that you no longer react mechanically to external stimuli. Your response is no longer automatic but chosen in a reflective manner. In addition to mental exposure, you can also voluntarily expose yourself to your fears in a controlled way through small actions. Let's suppose that, for example, you've realized that a current fear causing you panic is exposing yourself to social situations because you fear being judged, rejected, or left out, fears that have been common in humanity for ages. Your first step could be to introduce yourself to a new person every day. And practice this as many times as necessary until you master it, dozens, hundreds, however many times it takes. Dedicate a few minutes a day to this as part of your training. It's a motor skill that you integrate through repetition, over and over again. Little by little, you perform these small actions in a very controlled way so that your brain can assimilate them and stop feeling so much fear. In this way, you create a resilient brain. And that's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. If so, please give it a like. It's free, and it helps a lot because YouTube only recommends videos that have received many likes and comments. I also invite you to subscribe. Below in the description, you'll find the distribution lists with the main topics of the channel. See you soon, goodbye.